You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Dwayne Rollins and Kevin Laramie. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Abandon all hope, ye who enter here.
Oof. I guess today, Dwayne, is it is the last World Cup qualifying day in this round for CONCACAF.
Yeah, it is probably the last World Cup qualifying game in Canada. Yeah. Look, we're going to get into that in our second block. There is a story that's breaking this morning that's far more meaty that we're going to talk about first. I shouldn't laugh because it's a match-fixing story. But before we do all that, let's have a couple minutes just to reconnect. I mean, it is. We had a short show yesterday, although I think our short show was still a half hour and longer than most people on Labor Day.
Yeah, exactly. Dwayne, we just say hello and it lasts like 45 minutes anyways usually. So.
Yeah, so yeah, there you go. So yeah, we did our Labor Day show yesterday. So if you missed that, if you assumed we weren't publishing on Labor Day, no, come on, let's not be crazy. We publish every day, pretty much. But we got a show out which we reviewed Canada, Honduras, and all the indignity of that on Friday. So we reviewed that on Monday. We didn't really touch the MLS stuff. So we're going to go over that today a little bit. Not really a Canadian review because only the Whitecaps played and they lost again, and it's the same problem as always. So I don't know what more to say there. But we'll look at the rest of the league and all that. But as I said a minute ago, after I say hello to Kevin. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Dwayne. You know, I didn't realize that even maybe close to your mid-30s, you would realize that you're allergic to stuff. And I've been battling with this for the last few hours, and I kind of wish that it wasn't the case.
Yes, well, Kevin said that the first thing he said to me was he's all drugged up today. So that'd be, I'm joking a little bit, but he's on the react.
Exactly. I'm on the 10. Be careful.
Yeah, there you go. So Kevin's going to be reacted up today. So when we talk about stuff, Noah, it's what happens when you clean, Kevin. It's what happens when you clean. I think that the lesson here is not cleaning. Fine, yeah. I'll take that lesson. Fair enough. All right, let's get into the story that I alluded to. If you haven't heard yet, it's all over the place. But basically, in the press conference for the El Salvador Canada game today in Vancouver, the El Salvadoran players came out with a bombshell that is actually being heard around the world. And that's not an exaggeration. This is like the lead story across the footballing world right now. El Salvador produced a tape which allegedly shows a man offering to fix the game for them. And The Guardian has a good review of it here. There's also some transcripts out there, mostly in Spanish language, if you speak Spanish, that you can read what exactly was on this tape. But essentially what it was, Kevin, real quickly, is that he has offered $30 per minute for each player that plays in a win for El Salvador, $20 per minute for each player that plays in a tie, a draw for El Salvador and Canada, and $10 per minute for every player that plays in a 1-0 El Salvadorian loss to Canada in tonight's games. Now, this is a bit of a strange one for people that don't really follow fixing stuff all that closely, because they look at it on the surface, it might seem like, oh, this is just a guy offering performance bonuses. And my initial reaction to it, until I started talking to people that are far more involved in the fixing world, was that was maybe the case here. But after I saw the transcripts, and I've talked to, like I said, people that have investigated fixing at a much higher level than I could ever dream of, I'm pretty convinced that this was an effort to fix for gambling purposes today.
Well,
basically,
for gambling purposes, okay, because there's the gambling purposes aspect, and we talked about how you fix games, how you make money for like in smaller leagues and smaller games and less highlighted situation. Like you're not gonna fix France Germany in the final of anything. You're gonna fix some other spots, but the way it looked, Dwayne, is it for fixing for monetary purposes, or is it maybe for a reassurance of Honduras making it to the World Cup?
Yeah,
Or
that's the claim that's being made. I think that's a smokescreen, though. And that what's happened here is that this guy, through whatever backers he has, look, there's a possibility that's it, but that seems like a lot of effort for what's likely going to happen anyway. I believe that he is using that idea that it's for performance reasons as a smokescreen to hide his true intent. And that would be that he would lay a lot of money on an El Salvadorian win, and then he would cover that money with a bet on a draw and a bet on a 1-0 loss. And he would probably then double down on that 1-0 loss if they fell behind by a goal. Because the other part of this that comes out in the transcript that absolutely solidifies this as a gambling fix to me is he says, I wish you not to endeavor. This is translated, so forgive the kind of awkward language. I wish you not to endeavor to tie the game if you fall behind 1-0. Why would you ask, if you've already asked them as a draw as one of the options, why would you tell them not to draw it unless you have a plan in place that would involve you doubling down? For those who don't know, in most gambling markets that outside of the government lotteries that we play here, you can play in play, they call it. You can lay more money down in a game as the game progresses. And in fact, a lot of fixes rely on in-game plays because they will try and manipulate how a game is going to enhance the odds. So basically what I think is happening here is that they're laying heavy on the draw or the win, hoping to enhance or increase these guys because it's a 1-0 win, I believe, is what he's playing for too. And then they're have this plan in place that, okay, if this doesn't work out, if Canada gets the goal, because things can happen, then what you're going to happen is you're going to sit on 1-0. And they believe the Canada won't score beyond that.
What does it leave the game today? What does it say about today's game, Dwayne? What does it say about the possibility of 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific tonight at BC Place? Will we see a Salvador team so willing to show transparency that it will concede over 5 goals, maybe? Over 5 goals. Over 5 goals. Go Mexico.
Yeah, there you go. No, I think that we should talk about the El Salvadorian team a little bit, in terms of their own accord here, before we get into sort of what it means to Canada. Look, they came forward with this on their own volition. No one had to. That is my cynical nature is hesitating to completely give them benefits of this because part of me thinks that they were doing this because they didn't get enough money offered back, but that's neither here nor there.
But Dwayne, one thing though, they waited to were on Canadian soil when they did this too as well. They waited to be in quote unquote safe situation. That ramification will not necessarily be shown on the same day or tomorrow. They waited to be in Canada to do that press conference.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of that could have been circumstantial in the sense that part of it I think might have been them believing that they would be more heard here because the English press would get a hold of it, whereas if they did it down there, it might not have gotten much further than the Central American press.
Or credibility purposes. If you do the same thing in the Caribbean, in the Central America, you don't have the same credibility because we all know the amount of corruption there was there over the years in different football federations. Some of them are in jail, some of them are banned for life. So there's that aspect to it. Wait until you're in a place where you're not necessarily going to have those red flags raised right off the bat.
Yeah, well, Victor Matagliani, of course, is the president of CONCACAF now, too, so he did it in his backyard. He's from Vancouver, so that may have played a role as well. Now, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't point out that El Salvador and Honduras have a very long and infamous history together in terms of the world of football. They had a war. The soccer war is famously between those two countries. So there's a certain element of them sticking it to Honduras, too, as well, with them coming forward. I don't want to dismiss and discourage other players or other teams, other countries, whatever, from coming forward. That's not what I'm trying to do here, but I'm just trying to be you got to be cynical when you look at all this from all the angles, like I said. So that's hope that they were being completely sincere and putting this forward and trying to be transparent, but that's not ignore the possibility that very little is transparent when it comes to the war fixing, and that's kind of the point that I think needs to be made strongest most of all. And there's a few things in here, and we've said these before, we'll say them again. A lot of people look at Canada, Honduras, and they instantly dismiss the value or the importance or even why anyone would fix it because it doesn't matter to many people outside of those two countries. And that's true, but that's exactly why they fix it because it doesn't matter to a lot of people outside those countries. It's easier to fix. And the money levels put it forward, that seems absurdly low, like $900 a player. Basically, if you the 1-0 draws, $900. That's what they would be getting if they played the whole game, right? $10 a minute, 90 minutes. That's $900, right? $9,000. I'm trying to do my math.
Well, 900 and 9,000, Wayne. If that 9,000 pays your rent for 3 months and make your family be able to have 3 meals a day for 3 months, you might take that bet. You might take that money.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that their salaries aren't that strong, right? So it's $900. Yes, I'm not an idiot. You're right. No, their salaries aren't that big, and a lot of people say, "Oh, well," because they think big European competitions and they think the big salaries of the European stars. Well, no, guys that play in the Central American League are making maybe $3,000-$4,000 a year. That's why MLS is so appealing to a lot of these players that are from down there, because unless they're a star on their team, and even then they're probably making something like $25,000-$30,000 a year. And so even $1,000, imagine yourself, if you're go back in your mind, if you make more money than this now, remember your first job when you made $24,000. How much would $1,000 have mattered to you?
It's like you double your paycheck for that that month, literally.
Yeah, you could buy yourself a PS4. You could buy yourself groceries in some cases, right? Like
we can pay the rent this month. We'll be good this month.
Exactly. So that's kind of where we're at here with stuff like this. So don't dismiss those small numbers as being ridiculous and indicative of anything other than the fact that's why fixtures target certain leagues. That's why fixtures have targeted the Canadian Soccer League, not the one that's defunct, the one that still is running as an outlaw league right now, because the players there make $50 a game in some cases, right? So you're going to offer them $500, and well, that's 10 times their normal salary, right?
Well,
So
I have something here that expresses how I feel about this.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with
Every
you
time,
again.
like, why do we have to always bring those dark, shady places in the sport I love? Can we talk about the ball going on the pitch?
Yeah, well, we will in our next block, but yeah. Look, the other side of this is there are some people out there, overeager Canadian fans, we'll call them, that are hopeful that this might result because it's coming from Honduras. In Honduras being somehow sanctioned by CONCACAF, by FIFA. I tweeted out this morning that the chances of that happening fall somewhere between non-existent and my cat. Well, yeah, so non-existent and my cat getting a PhD in astrophysics is what I said that were the chances. I don't know if the cat's gonna get a PhD in astrophysics today.
Yeah,
I doubt it though.
When you have one cat, if you had like a million cat in a room with like a million typewriters, maybe you will be able to write Shakespeare one day. But that's a totally different story.
Yes, exactly. No, look, I can't see. First off, this is coming through a third party, so I don't know how you could possibly penalize the Honduran team in any real way that would stick. Whether or not they deserve it or not is a different story altogether. Look, I have no doubt that in the past, CONCACAF nations of all shapes and sizes have been victims of fixing. Canada, we know for a fact, has been both involved on the fixing side. People forget that, and I don't want to make ourselves sound all holier than thou, because back in before the World Cup in '86, those guys took money to throw a game in Thailand. I think it was Thailand or Singapore, somewhere in Asia anyway. So that's not be holier than thou here. So it's happened all over the world. We saw it with that strange game that we all watched, Canadian Voyageurs. We all watched, all 500 of us watched on our screen when there were 3 penalties called that were bizarre as all hell, and Canada couldn't hit the penalties, which I think made them call even more. It was one of those most bizarre games I ever seen. Montenegro, I believe, was who they were playing that day. So we've seen it, and that was proven to be fixed, that game. So look, there's lots of stuff out there, and there's always going to be lots of stuff, and we need to, hello darkness, my old friend, indeed. But you got to keep tipping the rock over, because what's underneath is going to kill us one day if we don't get it first, and that's kind of where this comes from, Kevin.
Yep, absolutely right. I have to agree.
All right. There's a minute left in the block, but let's take the break early, and we'll get into the actual tactics of tonight's game and the circumstances and all that sort of stuff.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And we're back. Look, I said abandon all hope is what I said in the lead up to this. I mean, I gave it my famous 1% promise earlier today, Kevin.
1%. I wish I was only 1% sometimes when it gets time to go to the bank, but that's a totally different 1%. But your 1% chance of Canada making it to the Hex today, yeah, there's that story though. We'll see the ramification and how Salvador comes to play tonight. But for Canada to score, what? Okay, is it realistic to imagine Canada can score 5 and hope for just a Mexico win and then you can be through? Or do Canada have to actually rely on Mexico putting a couple past Honduras to make their differential more easy to bear?
Well, okay, first off, I'll lay it out exactly here right now. For those that aren't completely familiar with the scenario, right now, Honduras obviously is 3 points ahead of Canada. So any amount of points that they gain tonight from Mexico would eliminate Canada outright. So that's the easiest scenario right there to look at. Canada, any result other than a win eliminates them as well. So Canada wins, Honduras loses. That's what we're talking about first off the top. Not that alone is not the most ridiculous concept because Canada's playing the weakest team in the group. Mexico's playing the best team in the group. Honduras is playing the best team in the group. That's what I'm trying to say. What we're getting into trouble here is the goal diff. Right now, Canada is on a -5. Honduras is even. That five goal differential needs to flip around in Canada's favor somehow tonight for that to work. Now, making that even more problematic is the second tiebreaker is goals scored. Right now, Honduras has 6 goals scored in the group. Canada has 2. So they would need to overcome that as well. However, someone pointed it out today to me, and it was a good catch, that Canada actually can win with a 5-goal turnover. So they're even on the goal diff if they score 4, not 5, because the 7th tiebreaker is away goals in the games between the two teams tied. So it would go to points, obviously. That's your first tiebreaker. Goal difference, goals scored, points in the matches between the two teams. So it's 3-H in Honduras in Canada's case. Goal difference in the matches between the two teams tied. So it was 1-0 Canada and 2-1 Honduras. So it's 2-2 on aggregate. So it's even. And then you go to goal scored between the two matches that the two teams played. So it's 2-2. Tie again. You go to the 7th criteria, which is away goals scored. Canada has 1, Honduras has 0. So that is a small little bit of hope you can hold on tonight to Canada. You can do it with a 5-goal turn if you score 4.
When you know what I just realized though, that if this was a home and away series, Canada would have eliminated Honduras.
Yeah, well, that's true, and that's what actually Benito Floro actually said that in the press conference. He got some flack from Canadian fans, is that they were asking him, I don't know, something, and he basically came back and said, answering the question, he said that FIFA needed to look at the tiebreakers because he felt that the tiebreaker was unfair and that Canada should advance because they beat Honduras on the home and away. That's, whatever. I mean, I think that there's probably some relevance to that, but on the other hand, all teams were playing under the same criteria from the beginning. It's not like this was thrown at Canada at the end. So I
know exactly. I just put a little bit of salt in the wound because, well, if this was something else, we actually got a quote unquote victory on Honduras.
Fair enough. Just as a fun little aside, this can't happen, I don't believe. No, it can't because Canada has the away goal leads. But had Honduras only won that game 1-0 on Friday, it would have actually then went to a playoff if the scores were 4-0 and 1-0 tonight. But at any rate, that's not going to happen. It's an interesting one. That's not a coin flip anymore. There would actually be a playoff game.
That would have been interesting, right? But anyways.
Yes, that can't happen now because Canada has the 7th tiebreaker would go Canada's way. All right. What do you start with this? I mean, look, it's not impossible that one of the two scenarios that needs to happen tonight could happen in my mind. Like, I could see Mexico beating Honduras 4-0 or something like that, but I can't really see Canada adding the 2 to that. I can't see Canada scoring 4 goals.
Here, no, maybe they don't need to though. But if, example, Mexico beats Honduras 4-0, okay? So 0 becomes -4. Canada -5. They need 2.
Yeah.
Can you see Cal Aaron and maybe Ricketts scoring tonight? That I can see. 2 goals? It's not easy. It still looked like a big mountain to climb, but 2 goals could be possible. You just hope that Mexico can score 4 at Azteca. And if there's one place where Mexico likes to play, It's on a Tuesday at Estadio Azteca, down at the Berisur, trying to get that win for their fans. It will be rocking tonight at Estadio Azteca.
Yeah, no, and it's a young team. People are asking that question whether it's quote unquote a Mexico B team, and I suppose it is. But I think that actually, if you're looking at this from a purely Canadian standpoint, a Mexico B team is a better option, because if it was a Mexico A team, they really would just be looking to get a win, but to not really exert themselves overly because they're already through. You put a bunch of young, hungry kids out there that are looking for a spot in the Hex, and they're going to be trying to impress. So I think that is a better scenario for Canada. I also think that the idea that Canada, that there are people up here too that want to suggest that somehow Mexico would rather, like because they're in Central America or something, that they would lie down for them. That's just ridiculous. There's a huge rivalry between Mexico and Honduras. They're not lying down. They're going to try and win this game. Don't worry about that. Again, it comes down to this. I mean, Canada's not like, the idea that Canada could score 3 goals in a game, let alone 4, is absurd to me right now. I'm not saying it's impossible. Anything can happen. Maybe Kyle Larin gets hot and finally starts scoring and gets a hat trick or something like that, and then we're going to be sitting there like the 3-3-3-3 or 3-0-3-0 situation could be a play. I don't know. But the bottom line to me, Kevin, going into this game is just, if you're a Canadian fan, just take it as a game. Speaking, I'll put my fan hat on. I just want Canada to win tonight. That's really all it comes down to end the cycle on a high with a win at home. A lot of the people that are in that stadium won't necessarily be looking at these numbers in the same way that we are, so they may not be upset if they walk out of there with a 1-0 loss or 1-0 win, pardon me. They might look at that as, hey, Canada won, that was good, and that might help grow that sort of fan base a little bit more. This is a small victory, I appreciate, but it's a victory nonetheless. And I think that that's kind of how you have to approach this. And yes, you can then belabor the fact that they didn't get a result, didn't get a win, I should say, in El Salvador. But, I mean, that's hindsight stuff. And again, as I said on yesterday, this idea that Canada wasn't trying to get a win in El Salvador is absurd. They were trying to get a win. They just weren't able to. So anyway.
Here's a question from a listener going, bribing, example, here it is. Bribing someone to win isn't necessarily a fix. It's maybe an incentive to play, no?
No, not when you're having it the other side of it, because they're telling them not to try and draw it if they're down a goal. This is absolutely a fix. Absolutely. Even if they're trying to put any money into the system whatsoever that's outside of the teams in case, it's just a slippery slope. Even if the guy does have pure motives, I'll say this. Maybe there's a chance that he's just a guy that wants an El Salvador business person, obviously, and he said he's speaking on Honduras' behalf. I guess this is what the scenario is that they're talking about. But even if that's true, it's still too slippery of a slope to ignore. But as I said, again, in the transcripts, it's pretty clear that if El Salvador falls behind 1-0, he has asked them to not try and tie it. That is clear manipulation on the score right there. There's nothing ambiguous about that. He is absolutely telling them in that particular scenario to not try and tie it. That erases to me any doubts that there's a gambling aspect to this, because as I said, they're going to cover that back with the if they don't get the El Salvador win or draw, they're going to cover it with a 1-0 El Salvador loss by having them protect that. And I think that El Salvador probably could protect the 1-0 loss pretty well against the Canadian team that's been pretty toothless. Sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
No, I was going to say, going back to today, we've talked about Canada, Salvador, Honduras. Mexico's already qualified, so we have Canada and Honduras battling for that second spot. Trinidad and Tobago is already qualified as well, leaving the United States in a not necessarily risky situation, but there is a possibility that the states would not qualify for the Hex today. There's a slim chance, but for some reason, there's still one there. It's rare that you have the United States not already qualified at this point.
Yeah, sort of. U.S. would have to have a 12-goal differential turned over for them to not qualify today.
Yeah, so there's a very slim chance.
So you'd have to have something like Guatemala 10, St. Vincent and the Grenadines nothing, and the U.S. losing 3-0. They're through. The only game, actually, if you look at because the other group A, or B, I should say, is gone. Like the two teams are qualified there. So basically, the States and Trinidad are qualified as well. You're still playing for first, technically, although that really only matters for kind of when the games take place. So the only game that really has any relevance tonight are these two games in Group A. And as we've said, even there, it's not much of a, if you're neutral, it's not much of an excitement tonight. So you're really, if you're neutral, you're hoping that maybe Mexico gets an early 2-0 lead or something like that, and then maybe we're talking. That's kind of where I'm at with this. If let's say Mexico was out and scores 2 goals in the first 15 minutes, or Canada, that's not be completely negative about it. Sure. Then you could start thinking about, okay, we only have to overturn 3, and maybe, especially if it's Canada, then we only have to overturn 2 or score 2 more goals ourselves, and blah blah blah. So that's really the only hope you have as a neutral. But I do have a question on this, and I'll ask your take on it, then I'll give mine in terms of Canada's approach tonight. A lot of people are asking, they say it's going to be interesting to see how Canada sets up when they need to score, because they've been so defensively minded throughout this entire campaign. Only have allowed, allowed 7 goals, but very few in games that matter. How do you think Flora will approach it tonight? Because I have an idea that's not going to make people happy, but how do you think Flora will approach it tonight?
Well, Dwayne, what's the one thing you're not allowed to do tonight? They cannot score. Salvador cannot score. So you have to align yourself a little bit defensively, You have to make sure that you control that game, that you control ball possession, that you control the movement of your block forward to create yourself an opportunity to get those 1, 2, 3 goals necessary. And for that to happen, you need to control the ball. You need to be set up defensively so you don't get passed by those quick Salvadorian wingers. No, so you have to play defensively, and you have to, not necessarily play pretty either.
Yeah, look, this idea that they're going to line up in some hyper-offensive tactic, to me, is naive. They're not. They're going to line up pretty close to what they already do. And that's going to make people angry and frustrated and all those sort of things, but it's not necessarily wrong, because at the start of the game tonight, the most important thing they can do is to make sure they win the game. So they're going to have to score at some point, and it's not like they're not trying to. They are at home. They will play a little bit more forward. They did against Mexico, actually. So they'll probably play very similar to they did against Mexico in the first game there. So they will try and get a little bit forward. They'll get Junior, and they'll get Arnfield into the game a little bit more, probably. But they're not going to completely abandon the idea of remaining tight and compact at the back, because that's the key to getting anywhere. They can't allow, as Kevin just said, otherwise it'll be a disaster. Now, let's say, for the sake of argument, that Canada is winning 2-0 in the 80th minute, and they're looking on their away scoreboard and they see that there's a 3-0 victor or 3-0 lead for Mexico. Then, yeah, they're throwing the keeper forward at that point. But nonetheless, they're going to wait to the very end until they have to do something drastic, something insane like that. You have to win the game first and foremost, because a draw would eliminate them, a loss would eliminate them, obviously, as well. You can't really worry about the goal diff. You just have to get the goals, especially in the first half. You just have to sort of play to win, and then you address it at the end. I'm also not too sure what Canada can do to really go hyper offensive, because they don't really set up to do that, other than to maybe get the wingers involved a little bit more. And I don't know. I don't think I really want Danielle Henry bombing up the field. Do you?
No, not really. We've seen what happens when that's the case. So yeah, no, stay in your position, please, people.
All right. I don't know. 1%. Is that too much? I don't know. Is it too little? Is it too much? It's hard to say one way or the other. There's not a lot of hope.
Here, let's just put it that way. There's a chance, as much as chance as when you go to the grocery store and you buy a scratch ticket. Sometimes you win a little something, sometimes you don't. More often you don't. Today, it's a scratch ticket. Are we going to win? I don't think so, but there's a chance.
Yeah. Look, as I said, I've said it a couple times already. I think that the best chance Canada has tonight is if Mexico goes out and does something like puts a sideways score on Honduras. That's probably our best chance. You know what? The peak Canada, I've had this nightmare in the past, is peak Canada is that Mexico's winning 5-0, and Canada is winning 1-0 in the 90th minute, and then somehow Canada coughs the ball up, and it's a 1-1 draw, and suddenly that they would have been through, and they won. That's the nightmare scenario in my mind.
Oh no! You just put it out there. It's gonna happen. That's what's gonna happen tonight. Mexico wins 5-0. Canada 0-0.
Last question, and then we'll wrap up. We'll turn a little bit European for a bit, and then with MLS at the end of the show. Is it for Floro if they don't get through?
Well, it depends. What was the job Floro had when he came in? Was it to right the ship and let the real future coach of the team step up. When you look at Floro himself as a coach, where he is in his career, in his life, might be the case. Maybe the plan was those 4, maybe 5, 6 years. Maybe he's going to stay for 1 year, not a whole cycle, but just to make sure that the growth continues. Because there has been some improvement since Floro has been the head coach. Maybe not as much as we would love to, but more than expected, I have to say, because there was not necessarily any expectations when Floro came in. Yeah, he has some good pedigree. He had the good pedigree, I want better to say. But for him to step down or be fired after what this has been the most interesting, maybe, or the most probability-wise closest Canada has been outside of today to make it to the Hex over the last 20 years, I don't know, does it reward for him to be canned, or should he step down? That's the question.
Yeah, different leadership at the CSA too, with Victor stepping aside. Well, he hasn't completely yet, so that throws a wrench into this as well. I was talking to someone deep within the Canadian soccer world, is how I'll put it, the other day about this, and sort of we're speculating a little bit what would happen. And the one thing that he came back with pretty forcefully was that if Canada does move on from Floro, they absolutely will be looking for another Floro type. They won't be looking to hire a young Canadian or something like that. So, MBS or Colin Miller or guys like that, probably. Colin Miller's not exactly a young Canadian, but you know what I mean. They're not. They would highly likely be looking outside the country again for another hire, and that does somewhat require you to be creative, because the CSA just doesn't have the budget to go get like anyone they want. They have to find someone that's willing to come in for the money that they want. They're trying to play off lifestyle stuff too, right? Like they're trying to bring someone that's interested to come to North America. They want to sort of, they give them a little bit of a housing allowance and things like that.
I'm going to start the hashtag, say no to Roy. No to Roy Ashen. No, please, God, no.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's going to happen. So, all right. That's the sick break. Come back. We'll talk a little bit about European qualifying and just international break fatigue.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS post-game show, Open Lines After Dark, Five Rings Daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
The best thing about the international break, Kevin, this time has been, and there hasn't been a lot of good about this international break, to be honest, but the best thing has made me forget what happens this weekend in the
Yeah, it's coming early in the season, isn't it? The Manchester Derby on Saturday.
Yeah, look, the first rule of the Manchester Derby. We won't go there again. But,
it's not queued up, so yeah, I'm not going to play it. But yeah, well, it's not the same, though. We can talk about it later, probably.
Yeah,
Friday.
We'll get back to once the international break ends. And normally, because Canada is deeply involved in this international break, it's gone a little faster than most. But normally, I hate this international break. I hate it so much, the September one, because you're just starting to get rolling in the season. The European season almost is taken from you. It's like, what are you talking about?
Break 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after? Let us either get a month of play in the Premier League before you stop it for a week and a half, or just wait. You know what I mean? Either do it before or after, not just right smack in the middle. It reminds me of when you go to school in Quebec. You start school, then you have Labor Day weekend. Why not start after Labor Day, please, like the rest of the world, and not before? Because you start school, woohoo, but you get a big weekend right away. Let us start after the big weekend, please.
Yeah, it takes away the fun of having a long weekend because you just got back. And most kids, they don't want to admit it, but they're happy to get back to school, and then all of a sudden they take away from their friends for an extra day. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Look, the European qualifying season, all of those guys, World Cup qualifying got going as well this weekend. Obviously, there's so many. It's so hard to get back into that too. When you talk about you just come out of the European Championship, and then all of a sudden you're talking about San Marino and Ashburn again. It's kind of difficult to get going there.
Yeah. Especially when you talk about those two teams.
Yeah, and
Watch
speaking of
it.
which, that is the first game that happened in the World Cup qualifier, and Azerbaijan won 1-0. So there you go.
And let's just explain the qualification process for Europe. In UEFA, you have groups of 6. The first one is qualified for the World Cup. The second goes into a second round of qualification process, which usually it's a playoff home and away series or a playoff type of bracket. So,
Yeah, and it's a very long and drawn out process, and it can get quite exciting, but you do have a lot of dead rubbers within the European qualifying. That's one of the things that people, when they talked about the change to 24 and the European, it did sort of add something to the qualifying process that I kind of caught me a bit off guard, in the sense that I was focused, like many people, on what it would mean to the tournament itself and what it would do in terms of the overall quality of the European Championships. And I think now, a couple months after it, we can look back and say, maybe it did hurt it a bit, because there were a lot of low-scoring games in that tournament. But nonetheless, what it did at the qualifying process was that it made, I'm just looking for a matchup here, that it made certain matchups that the Czech Republic, Northern Ireland, which took place this past weekend, it made that in the European Championship seemed like it made more sense, that it was more important, because there were just more teams going in. But now we're back to kind of the traditional one, where you're going to have pretty clear favorites in most groups, and then there's going to be just a lot of teams that are just flubbing around in the middle there, that creates a lot of games that are dead rubbers, which are games that are really just about pumping up, giving those teams an opportunity to play.
yeah, well, to make an example of what you're saying, we have groups, example, like a group A, all right? Netherlands, France, Sweden, Bulgaria, Belarus, Luxembourg. You're not going to tell me that the 6th game of Belarus and Luxembourg and Bulgaria all together, it means anything, because they have no shot whatsoever of finishing first or second in that group. Even Sweden, with the time's retirement, have almost no shot of making it those two. So it's basically already between Netherlands and France for that group. So that's what you mean by dead rubber.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, we saw the Dutch bail out in the last one, and they are going to be one of the most fascinating teams to watch. They start their qualifying campaign today. That will be the game that I will be watching this afternoon because of that very interest. But nonetheless, like you say, it is an easier process. For the big teams, this is an easier process. The big teams don't really like this either, because they have to go, they have to play the San Marino, right?
You have to play 6 games. So, so you have to play everybody.
Well, yeah.
Exactly. So you have to play those games that are not necessarily like Netherlands going to have to travel to Belarus to play that game. So no, it's not an easy process.
Yeah, well, yeah, and you get crazy stuff. There will be, in any given cycle, there will be 1 or 2 teams at most that will sort of step up and challenge, usually for that playoff spot. But other than that, not a lot of talking points, other than sort of to see how the big teams position themselves for the tournament in 2 years' time.
So let's just quickly go through the group, Wayne. We just mentioned the out favorites. So Group A, Netherlands, France, Sweden. Group B, Portugal, Switzerland, even Hungary are the top 3 teams in that group. Group C, Germany, Azerbaijan. So that group is Germany and anybody else. You have a Czech Republic as well, Northern Ireland, San Marino, and Norway. But that group is basically going to be dominated by Germany. Group D, Wales, Austria, Republic of Ireland, and maybe Serbia. So Group D is actually a little bit more open, and it's quite interesting to see this group unfold, because you have teams that are closer to each other than the other group, especially Group A to C.
Yeah, Group B is Denmark, Poland, Kazakhstan, Montenegro, Romania, and Armenia. The Poles look good in that, probably are the favorite team in there, but that's kind of a weird group in the sense that there's a lot of middling teams, for lack of a better way to put it, but nonetheless, that's a group there. The group that a lot of people over here will pay the most attention to is Group F, which is has both the Scots and the English in it. England got it done, but they're doing what England does. They barely got it done this week, but anyway. Scotland, England, Slovenia. That was a big win for England, actually. Jokes aside, Slovenia and Slovakia are probably the 2 teams that might challenge them there. I suspect that England would have to think that they're the favorite. Scotland, if you're a Scottish fan, this is an interesting group. It's a nice draw for you. You get the rivalry game, but I would think you would have a chance. Lithuania and Malta make up the rest of that group. Group G, and this sort of speaks to those blowout games that we talked about, because Spain and Liechtenstein played their first game yesterday. It was 8-0 Spain. So they narrowly edged that one out. Italy, Albania, Macedonia, Israel are the rest of that group there. So, you're looking at the Spanish and Albania made the European Championship, but I don't think that they're much of a challenge to the Spanish and the Italians here, right?
No chance in hell. Group H, Belgium, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Greece, will Greece make it out of this group? It's going to be tough because Belgium and Bosnia has grown a little bit over the last few years. Well, since it's allowed to play, but now it's having a different type of football. We've seen them in the qualification process. 4 years ago, they were a lot more prolific. So can Greece repeat their success of the past, but this time at a World Cup level, it's going to be tough this time around. And you have now Group I, Ireland, Kosovo, Turkey, Croatia, Finland, Ukraine. It's going to be interesting because everybody drawed already after one game. So the group is wide open. Can Iceland conclude or make reality their ultimate dream? Which, it was fun, the Euro this year with the clap now making its way around supporters section around the world. But can they qualify for a World Cup now, bro?
Much more difficult, and Turkey and Croatia to me would be slight favorites to go advance. I know people are going to want that Cinderella the story to continue, but I would still think that they're in tough and probably would be battling for them for the playoff spot with one of Turkey or Croatia. I think Croatia is probably the favorite in that group. Kosovo, of course, is the sort of the nice story in there that they are making their debut. The Kosovo FA tweeted out that they are the only team in the world with an undefeated record of World Cup qualifying. That was based on their 1-1 draw. Just started out their first ever game with the first ever qualifying game involved here as well. So there you go. Let's see. Gibraltar is also involved in this too. So that's the first World Cup campaign that they have been involved in, although they were in the European qualifiers as well. So as you said, we are looking at second place teams in this, so we'll watch this carefully, but not a lot to talk about in the first group day game, because they're not really mixed out. There's no really storylines going on here. And so
there's, like we mentioned, there's so many games to be played. It's gonna finish in more than a year's time. It's going to be finished around the end of October 2017 for majority of the groups, depending on the amount of games they fit into the international breaks up to this point. So we're talking about a year and some change of a process for who's going to be qualified. So now it's the beginning of that marathon. It's not a sprint.
Exactly. I don't know. Any final thoughts on European qualifying? Otherwise, maybe we'll just take the break a little early, come back and wrap the show up with some MLS talk.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
I'm just looking at the Reddit here to see if there's any other stories that are breaking while we're talking here. Infantino opens the door to a 40-team World Cup co-hosted by Canada, Mexico, and the United States. We're going in as hosts. We're going in as hosts.
Well, that was a one joke that I didn't do today. I'm like, Dwayne, after all, isn't 2026 the ultimate goal?
Yeah.
Let's host a damn thing. That way we'll get in. If you can't qualify, buy your ticket in.
Now you're going to believe us. Here's the other thing about this. We're going to wrap up some MLS talk, but real quickly. This is why I'm not as broken up by this cycle as maybe others are. First off, I have a very long view, having been involved. I'm not trying to say I'm a better fan or something. Don't say that. But I've been around so long now. I'm an old man at this point.
You're just maybe a little bit more jaded than most, maybe.
Yeah, and it's like I look at the Mexico games, and I flash forward 2 years ahead, and I go, God, it would be ugly in Russia if they were to get there, right? And then I kind of want to qualify when they can be competitive there. And maybe that's asking a bit too much, perhaps.
Maybe that's why the qualification process is that way. Just put it out there so that when you get there, you don't necessarily get exposed.
Yeah, because Mexico is a good team at the World Cup level, but they're not the top teams at the World Cup level. So Canada goes to Russia right now, and they can improve in the 2 years. I get that, and the Hex would help them improve. And I do think advancing to the Hex is something that I would enjoy and that I did want. But nonetheless, in terms of actually getting to a World Cup, as I've said many, many times before, I had no hope anyway heading into this cycle. So the fact that they got this close to the Hex is somewhat refreshing to me. But at any rate, okay.
Well, Dwayne, there was one game in the weekend in Major League Soccer, including a Canadian team, and Vancouver lost again.
Yeah, 1-0, didn't score. Let's just look at the standings here real quick. Yeah, we'll go. Look, I don't know what more to say. I feel like I'm beating up on them right now, and that's something coming from me, right? That I don't want to like feel like I'm just picking on them, but they're not. They're flat. They're just.
There's a few games otherwise. Yeah, you have the Red Bulls 1-0 in Vancouver, New England 2-0 over Colorado, Chicago 3, Philly 0. So Chicago, a few wins in the last few weeks are maybe not that far away from the red line now. We'll talk about it in a second. But FC Dallas 3, Portland 1, and the Galaxy 2, Columbus 1.
Yeah, NYC, where's the NYC result? Yeah, that's a Thursday game that we kind of forgot on Friday, but NYCFC beat DC United 3-2 in a last-minute goal, which puts NYCFC back on top of the East. Although the way that the things shaped out was probably good for the Canadian teams this week in terms of the Canadian Eastern teams this week in terms of the overall standings. Toronto can go back to the top of the East with a win, although they did drop to third with the results playing out the way that they did. TFC still does have the most points per game in the East at 1.59, although it's a virtual tie in the sense that NYCFC is 0.57. It's still 1.57, 1.54 for the Red Bulls. The Impact at 1.42 are hardly out of it right now. But you look at that red line battle, Orlando City, 31 points right now. Anyone who is still fearing that Toronto is going to miss the playoffs 12 points up with a month to play, that would be peak TFC. I'll give you that, but I can't see it happening, Kevin.
No, but when you mentioned the red line battle, it's going to be interesting because it's actually closer than people imagine. DC United is in 6th position. So Montreal is 5th, 3 points behind Philly, which are 3 points behind Toronto. But then you have a 5-point gap to DC United. You got that red line. Orlando, 31. New England, 30. But even Chicago now, 26. And guess what? They're not last in the league anymore. Columbus equaled at the bottom of the East with 26 points. So even for those two teams, making a run, winning 2-3 games, and you're talking about a playoff position. So it's not over at all in the East if you're going outside of the top 4 or even 5, depending on that, if you include Montreal or not.
Yeah, well, you look at it. Talk about peak MLS. Columbus goes from the MLS Cup final to last in the league. The Houston Dynamo are actually last overall in the league right now with 25 points in the West. But nonetheless, if you look at the sort of the strength and balance of the schedule, then I would say Columbus is playing the worst of any team in the league right now. I look at New England too, and I don't know what the hell's going on there. The minus 16 goal differential. Kamara's never really made a big difference. This is a team that certain people, so high-ranking people, picked to be MLS Cup contenders, favorites even in some cases at the start of the year, only won one game on the road. You look at the road records for the teams, and this is kind of what separates the top from the bottom here. Let's look at the average win total for 6th through 10th on the road in the East. Let's just quick do the math here. 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. It's 1. The average win total amongst teams at the bottom is 1. That's kind of telling there. You look at teams like Chicago with 10 losses on the road, 8 losses for New England, 8 losses for Columbus. That's really where you get down to it. So Toronto's 5, 6, and 4. The way record doesn't look so bad when you look at it that way, right?
No, exactly. All right, let's move to the Western Conference now, Dwayne. We have FC Dallas now on top of the Western Conference with a big gap when you're talking about a lead of 8 points in front of Real Salt Lake. Colorado, 3rd now. They're dropping. Remember that time when they had over 2 points per game? Average now down to 1.65. They got 2 games in hand, so they can bridge that gap maybe, but getting closer to Dallas will be a tough task. Timmy Howard, again, that the whole it's not like he's done better, if not equal at math. That's not the reason why they're dropping, but it's the attention. And maybe they needed somebody to continue that goal scoring prowess. And the injury to Jermaine Jones obviously is a big reason why Colorado is going downwards in the standing. But it's still a very interesting story for me to follow.
Yeah, I think the Rapids are going to have done well to have made the playoffs this year, and I think that they are highly likely to make the playoffs at this point. based on the standings. They're not 11 points off. But I think the idea that the Rapids were ready to become a championship contending team until they fixed their front attack was a bit silly. As I've said many times before on this show, and Two Solitudes, goal scoring is what wins in Major League Soccer. I know the old adage, the cliche, is defense wins championships. It's a load of bunk. I can statistically prove this. And perhaps I probably will at some point heading into this game. But if you look at past champions, teams that have the most goals scored in the regular season are far more likely to win MLS Cups than teams that have allowed the least. So don't allow that defense wins championship bump to get caught up in your thinking when you're handicapping the playoffs, folks, because it really is about goal scoring in Major League Soccer, especially in sort of the short sprint that is the playoff race there. Let's talk about the Whitecaps a little bit more, though. Like, they are only 4 points back of Portland right now, and it's not like the Timbers are ripping it up. It's not like any of the teams that are ripping it up. But if you're the Whitecaps, if you're a Whitecap fan, Kevin, do you want to make the playoffs? Really? Or do you want maybe the front office to have a bit of a kick in the behind to maybe make some changes in how they approach things? Because to me, and I am a longtime critic of how the Whitecaps are built, both in terms of how they handle their domestic stuff, but that's a different story altogether, and more to the point how they sort of approach things in a cheap way. And I'll use that term purposely, cheap.
I think for me, it's a shame that MLS and the way that it's set up with everything, that even if you tank, example, if you tank and finish last and you get like a big reward in other sports with the first draft pick, that is like a game changer. In MLS, you do have the first draft pick if you tank, but you don't necessarily have the game changer that goes with it. You have to be a great prospect for the future, a great player that you can mold and become a mainstay for your team, but you're not going to draft a Lionel Messi. So, there's that aspect to it, that it's a shame if you tank, you don't necessarily have the reward with it. What do you have the reward if you tank? Well, you mentioned it. Clear the front office, change the coach, those type of questioning become more open when you have reason like, we're dead last in the Western Conference, we're on our way there, we're ninth. What do we need to do to spark things up? Those questions arises, and maybe that's what the fan base should want, at least not necessarily changing everything, but a bigger introspection of philosophies of how to view MLS 3.0, how to view your team. It's not 2011 and 2012 anymore. How do you build a team, including the DP slots? What type of DP do you need to go get? Those are the questioning that I think Vancouver fan base should be asking.
Yeah. Look, I look at this, at how they're playing this year, and I look at those 44 goals allowed, and that really is the difference between this year and last year. They're kind of scoring maybe at a very similar rate than they did last year, maybe even a little bit higher, but they've been leaking goals, and they were completely reliant upon shutting teams out, winning 1-0 last year, and now they're, instead of winning 1-0, they're losing 1-0, and I think that speaks to how precarious that approach is within Major League Soccer. Little tweaks to other teams' rosters can shift that balance just enough to push you below that red line. My fear, if I were Whitecap fans, would be that they do bomb out here, that they do continue to struggle the rest of the way through, and they only have 6 more games left to sort of recover at this point. But yet, the front office, they just decide to cut Carl Robinson's head off, and figuratively, for folks to not get too violent here. In today's world, we have to make sure we understand that. Figuratively cut Carl Robinson's head off and then make no other changes in their approach. And if they just do that, I'm not sure much will change next year, because the same issues will be at play. They're going to need to be perfectly defensively in order to win with the approach that they take, unless they can find game changers. And I'm not sure they're going to find game changers without a philosophical difference in how they approach their roster building. Some people might argue out there that perhaps the homegrowns will start to play up, although I was talking to people in Vancouver recently that say that a lot of the homegrown talent that they're relying upon, although their USL team is doing well, they just don't think that they're stagnating, is what they said to me, that they're not necessarily stepping up and grabbing the brass ring, so to speak. Kind of Davies was their best prospect, even though he was only 15, and they've already brought him up, so there's not much going there. They have a strong USL team, but it's not necessarily a strong development team, Captain.
Yeah, no, exactly.
All right. Look, I hate international breaks. I really do, because what the hell are we going to talk about here for 5 more minutes? We could keep rambling on, but I think maybe at this point in time we should just go back to the World Cup qualifying, get our predictions for tonight, and then call it a day.
Let's just see Canada scores 2 and Mexico like 3, but it's not enough to overturn everything, and we're just that close.
All right, I think that what's going to happen is that Canada is going to win 1-0, and Mexico is going to win 2-0. And it's never really going to be a play, the advancement, but we will get the win. And it will be disappointing, but at least we'll have the win to go off on. And I think that is something to build on moving forward. Although it will be disappointing, as I said. We'll probably, if that does happen, if that scenario does occur, obviously we'll touch on the game tomorrow on the show. But I think we'll leave the overall evaluation of the cycle for a week or so, just to let it permeate a little bit. And we'll get some guests on, and we'll have like a breakdown show, but we'll leave that well enough alone and just focus on the results tomorrow. Kevin, any final thoughts before we say goodbye for today?
No, I think it's time we actually ponder on our experience tonight, because, well, we'll need some comforting, I guess.
All right. Until 11, always, Kevin, say goodbye.
Until tomorrow, 11 a.m. for another edition of Soccer Today. Well, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.